I will start by looking at the heterogeneity, where we are having something in a different way. And can you put the next slide, please? Next slide. So, I mean, these are microbiology, heterogeneity, post-heterogeneity, population, spatial, and temporal. Let's start. I don't know. Once we are ready to start, we stop, and then as God help us continue another time. If you have to follow, I'm going to take it slow and steady so that can have the background as much as some people want to take this kind of thing forward after now. Now, heterogeneity, we find out that individuals are members of classes that differ systematically in the frequency or infectiousness of their contacts and in the distribution of their contacts with the other groups, as well as their risk of severe outcomes if infected. So why does that matter? How do we account for it in models? I was saying initially that most of the models we have had, including the one that Ritchie and Cage was doing, they were homogeneous systems. Now, where we are only classifying everyone to be the same. But in reality, it's not always like that. And that is what brings in the feature of three things that determines how a model should look like, which is accuracy, transparency, and flexibility. Now, if a model is going to be very realistic, it has to go beyond transparency or being flexible. It has to begin to be more complex. We have to add some complexity. And in adding the complexity, we begin to consider what we are talking about. So, individual members of classes that differ systematically in the frequency of their contacts, and then or their infectiousness of their contacts. Now, I can start with you have SIR. This is the basic stuff that you have SIR, right? Now, if I want to introduce heterogeneity, I can have many classes of heterogeneity. This is one form of heterogeneity. There are different forms of heterogeneity. I can have different forms of SIR. S1, S2, S3, and then this is population heterogeneity, because I'm looking at the each of the population, and then I say I1 of compartments, I1, I2, I3, and then I have R1, R2, R3. Now, what have I have decided to create more classes in the society, because I'm seeing that I'm seeing the need that society may not only be just a single class in that particular disease. Now, what determines the structure of a model are in different forms. Now, one of it is the pathogen. The pathogen dynamics. The dynamics of the pathogen determines the structure of the model. Now, if a model is going to follow a particular structure, the pathogen will play the role, the host play the role, the host in terms of either the intermediate host or the human host to the vector, depending on the kind of disease you are looking at. So it can determine the kind of structure the model will have. And then other factors can also play in terms of maybe some exogenous factors like environmental factors, And then like social factors can also play to determine the structure of the model as regards the dynamics of that field. So now when you look at the contacts, the contacts for a disease to happen, there must be contacts. The contacts can be successful and may not be successful. So, but there must be a contact for a disease to happen. Now, and then the interest of mathematicians is on the contact, not about the statistics talk about the contacts. The statistics talk about the patterns, variables, and all of that. The patterns, and then how each of those variables, how they relate to each other, or how they associate. So, but the mathematics talk about the contact, and that's when we talk about the transmission dynamics. So, most of the models that are doing now, modeling actually transmission dynamics, and that's why the mathematics play very strong role. But in that transmission dynamics, every transmission is a function of some contacts. Now, the contacts happens, and then individuals are members of classes that differ systematically in the frequency of their contacts. Now, their contacts can change. You know, a lot of things can affect the contact. In fact, most of the time, when I look at, take for instance, if I look at the force of infection, what's the force of infection? The force of infection is the rate of acquisition of an infection, right? So, and then, if you look at one important thing about force of infection is the beta high, right? The beta high, the beta here is the transmission parameter, right? So the transmission parameter is a function of three basic things, which is the epidemiological factors, environmental factors, and then sociological factors. Because at most times you may not easily be able to fit this kind of parameter with an ordinary observed pattern, or you think that may be very, very impossible, because it's a function of many variables when it comes to this. So when you look at that, you find out that this beta can actually this beta parameter can be forced to have different kind of contacts that introduce in the material, that the contacts can be different form, because this is influenced by epidemiology factor, and influenced by environmental factors. When I think environmental, you know what I mean by like the climates and land use change, and then all of that. So, and then social factors like demography and what have you. And then in the distribution of their contacts with the other groups. Now, and then as well as the risk of severe outcomes with infection. So why does that matter? And how do we account for all of these models? Okay, so to find out that severity now here is being seen as a function, as a function of age. Now, there are certain diseases that they are actually, if you understand, the average age of infection. Like, to know the average age of infection, it can make you to know what age brackets are at risk, most risk of infection. Take for instance malaria, and then there are certain diseases that we call childhood disease. Why do we call them childhood disease? The reason why we call them childhood disease because the age class that disease usually occur most are their childhood age, maybe less than 5 years and all that. Right? So now we are saying that severity can be a function of age. That means a disease can become much more severe or complicated due to age. Now, when you are young, there are certain diseases that a young person, maybe like less than 5 years, that is easily broken. Easily broken. And then as you grow in age, you begin to have some level of what I call in the physics of things, shock absorber. Now, you know what I mean by shock absorber. Now, some of them are not, when I mean shock absorber, I mean immunity. Immunity may be lifelong, they may be temporary. Especially when it comes to some childhood disease, you find out that their immunity is lifelong. And then other ones do not have lifelong immunity, where your immunity may wane after some time. And then another thing that immunity is a very interesting, because we talk about immunity. You can be affected or influenced by so many factors. Genetics are made. Now, some people may certain immunities to disease generally. Why some people may not be able to build because of their gene, their genetics does not support their antibodies. So you find out that genetics can also run because your antibodies that can rise up against a particular disease to build immunity. So you find out that also malnutrition. Now, nutritional status is very important. Now, if your nutritional status is very bad, like that also like your immunity will be downplayed. So now, and that is why most times when there is a disease, whether the disease is novel or not novel, like COVID-19 was a novel virus. The pathogen was novel because there are not any kind of that pathogen before. The question is, can we find vaccination or treatment? Because some people are saying, oh, why not let's depend on immunity? We cannot depend on immunity because immunity is also an heterogeneous. Like all of you can see that you can be born of the same parent and you don't have the same level of immunity. So now, how do we get immunity? How do we get immunity? You can get immunity through vaccine, artificial vaccine induced immunity. So that's why government said, the policy maker said, let's go for vaccine induced. Because if you say you want to depend on natural immunity, well, they leave the population their own and there have to be a lot of mortality. So they have to go for induced. So you find out that certain diseases become more severe. There are severe cases of disease as a function of age, due to age. Now, there are certain diseases that, like when you are at certain age, that we're talking about female genital dystopiasis. If dystopiasis is then treated at certain age, then when the person able to evolve with another age, you find out that the case becomes very severe and complicated when it's not taken care of as. So there's big for to look at the aspect of age factor and can see some of the disease we do that here once, and then this is a case of 3 scale yes, and then the percentage the cases for different diseases like diphtheria, pathogens, Prof, and then measles and mumps. You find out that this is more or less like a cross-sectional data because the evolution with age and not time. But you look at this space that as you go on there, from this stage, look at page 1 for diphtheria, and at page 3, you see it's on the hospital, so you are having more than 10 cases. But as the age goes down, you find out that as people age, we begin to see that it's depleted. But for some other disease, you also find very low, and then at certain age, when they are very low. So most of the disease here, you find out that they are affecting parasite of people influence how many contact they have and with whom. Now, take for instance for HIV, like somebody who has like they have girlfriends, almost all states Nigeria. So your character can also determine, percent of individual influence how many contacts they have. Now, if you are a womanizer, it means that you are prone to all sexual diseases, sexually transmitted disease. the opportunity for it to be infected very high. And also, like there was a case of a lady from years back. So some of you that used to go to mountains, go to mountains or you go to our park to go and pray, and then because of the husband is not there, and a lot of people are praying and they are different kinds of they are doing different things. And because God, what happened? People in the course of their praying, either with their power after they impregnate or sleep with all those women. And none of them got an HIV. But you don't know which of their fast or pastor that slept. And then brought the HIV back to their family. The husband had time with his wife. And then what happened? The husband convert the HIV from the wife. Eventually, the two of them died, and they left their children as orphans. So that was simply years past when there were no much HIV treatments, available in the country. So now what we are saying is that the kind of contact we pick, can influence your level of infectiousness. So there are size of individuals influence how many contact they have and with whom. So this affects both their likelihood of getting infected and their likelihood of passing on infection. So you see now, if you have contact with low risk people or high risk people, you are going to come to that. So how do you differentiate that the low risk and the high risk population? So these are things we need to look at, in terms of looking at heterogeneity in disease. Yes. Yeah. So age and transition opportunities. Take care. I would have gone to use the Nigerian sort of data. I need to get the job when I get there. So like children like this. For the first case of was this smallpox now in 1978. Some children were in school because after the open of school, every year, like January, just Zoom, people are brought to different places. Some people went to Lagos, some goes to Sokoto, different places. They came together. If you go to school, if you really want to carry out the research on children, when it comes to certain things, you go to school where they just in and do a kind of survey. Find out testing, we find out that there will be certain people are come with certain things or the other, and they will be spread. My children school in a way at a certain time, they resumed, and then there was ventilated. I was at the and then people were having as it was finished now, children were protecting this because children, and how many of you we have seen that somebody come to put hand on your nose? What children can do like this and say, touch you and it puts their hand in the bubble and touch somebody's nose. You understand? They don't see that anything. So the contact is very high. They can see somebody can pick the person's water and drink, and then can do a lot of things. While he's eating, he collect bread, he put the bread in his mouth, and then glucose and enter the bread, he put it in the mouth again. No, but look at all of it now. Contact rate is not, if you look at the way that it's together, they are sitting there because of this, because of this and go on. So age and transmission opportunity. So the two of them move together. Age and transmission, there are things we need to look at. 3 forms of heterogeneity generally. Now, some individuals are more infectious, or some are more likely to get infected. But these are uncorrelated. Because you cannot really measure it. It's random. So random heterogeneity usually cause biology or site of infection. So more infections like SARS, super spreaders, tuberculosis. Now if somebody has tuberculosis there now and just for why? And just thing you know what we have. So a lot of people will get it. So it may not occur immediately. Maybe 10, 16 years. And you start seeing, so more likely to be infected, immunocompromised. Now, if you have some underlying disease, you can take it very fast. You're having some heart issues, some maybe diabetes and all of that, very, very fast because the immune system is already down. So, and that is why for such people, you have to be very careful. Now, number two is some individuals are more likely to get infected, and those same individuals are more likely to pass on infection. So, if they are infected, no random heterogeneity, usually behavioral source. And this one has to do it's not concerning, it's not normal, it's regular, like sex workers. Sex workers. People who are involved in sex business, they are alone, they have customers every night, and then people are coming to pick them easily. Because they have a lot of transition. Now, not only HIV, many of us talk about HIV, there are other more dangerous STIs, sexually transmitted infections like gonorrhea, that does not give up. You continue the living all your life. Most of them are taking the SIS capsule, so you can always select, even after getting pregnant. And then, some of them, they very difficult with you. So now children also, like respiratory influencers. That's why you cannot always recover fully from an influenza. You know what I mean by influenza? Influenza. It comes and goes. And then in every season, you have different ones. The strain that comes here may not be the strain that will come another year. So that's why people take jabs every now and then to be able to stay safe from influenza. Because the strains always deeper. Now, don't stay patient in the hospital and have no man because you don't know where it's going to come. Somebody can come to the hospital with another disease that you didn't come to treat, and you get your own package there. And then some strains of infection are more infectious than others. Now, that's the truth. The one I just said now, like, if you have a stronger strain, then you know what it means. So, pathology biology, toxin producing this bacteria, enteric bacteria, drug sensitive and drug resistant strains, different antigen types. If you have a particular strain A, and then you were treating strain A, strain B, it's not like doing folk. People were getting different strains and you need to get another vaccine to be able to take care, because it's viral disease. It's always tending to more of what we call now the initially mutates. When you talk about virus, it mutates very fast. Now, heterogeneity generally, in the basic SR model, we have assumed that the population is homogeneous. That is, everyone is considered to be identical, except for the sister class. So, and to have random contacts. So the contacts are not specific. Now, so in this case, you are having a random homogeneity. And then the next thing is, in general, is this system contain many heterogeneity, such as you have host heterogeneity, you have population heterogeneity, you have spatial heterogeneity, you have temporal heterogeneity, which is happened to me because when the systematic from the first attempt of the year. So you have heterogeneity. The standard models introduce compartmentalize the problem only in terms of infectious approach. And is classifying individuals as susceptible, infected, or recovered, and modeling the number of individuals in this compartment. Now, all the models you have looked at so far, they are only on microparasitic disease. And for microparasitic, the interest is to model infectious status. Microparasitic disease are what are those pathogens? Microbial pathogens and microparasitic disease are they are virus, they are parasites, and some protozoa. Fungi, what are you mentioned other ones? Bacteria, microparasitic disease. Now, what we focus on those kind of diseases are modeling there. To look at the infectious status and modeling. So that's why all the models we have been doing Monday, they are all microparasitic. Now, when you move into macro, it's not going to be this form. So, but I'm not talking about that now. So for macro, you are looking at, you are modeling the body. And that's when you talk about the elites, you talk about chistosomes, talk about glaciers and all of that. So, but for this, say as such, there is only one degree of subdivision within this population. That's homogeneous. So in this course, we introduce a second degree modern dividing the population into classes with similar behavioral characteristics. So these characteristics will be choosing such that all members of class have comparable risk of both contracting and transmitting infection. Is here. Now, two clear motivated examples dominate the indicator of models dealing with risk. Number one is H doctor for childhood infection. H doctor. Now, most of the diseases that are, I mean, especially things like protozoans, like malaria, you find out that like somebody was protecting something like that bathroom, working on malaria, and needed to look at classes age, different age, different, and then the adult and all, where you have to put people in different age groups. So, and then we have to restructure, which is meant for sexually transmitted infections, where you are looking at loans and IMC. And then models for STIs frequently subdivide the population to classes dependent upon the risk associated with behavior in this class. So, STIs, they are looking at the risk. So, high risk individuals, for example, have many sexual partners. Now, because we don't know which one. Now, in that situation, when you have a boyfriend and he has many girlfriends, then you are a case of you may guess that you will not that end in 6 days. But you have a husband or a wife that has many other concubines outside. You may contact many diseases. You are at a very high risk. So, for example, so that high risk individuals have many sexual partners, or for some STIs, who partake in intravenous drug use, frequently sharing needles, and all that. So as a result, individuals in this class have a higher risk of both contracting and transmitting infection. So given the very clear link between the number of partners and the risk of infection and the heterogeneity between individuals, it seems legit to include such relation in models if we wish to understand and predict the patterns of sexually transmitted infection given the location or given the space. Now, although ignoring the behavioral heterogeneity when we ignore it, and assuming that everyone has the same number of partners, is appealing, that you can easily do your maths. You understand? There are certain models you do just to fulfill all righteousness for mathematics. Just do them for mathematics. Not that. You understand? Because if you put certain reactions into issues, there are certain children you not be able to do. So there are, I'll be talking about, because of so it's either you are going two ways, computational or analytical. Now sometimes we want to go computational, analytical, and want to be very realistic with very big problem. Yes, because certain theorems that are already established may not actually be able to capture the dynamics of that systems. That's why you see for biological systems is actually more complex than physical system. Physics. Let me tell you, as far as the mathematical physics is concerned, they have finished everything there. There are people who have been when I see somebody who is doing geometrical, I don't have. The only thing that I give is the graph. You don't go graph. Not that I mean, they have finished everything in mathematical physics. Finished. And why people are close. So, but people in Nigeria, because they just imported some books from abroad. What there was a time I was asking somebody that look now, we have never started using laptop in Nigeria. For some class, they are finished using laptop, they are using something there before they print. So what I'm saying is that now for biology, biological system are more complex. That's if you what's it called? They are complex, much more complex than physical system. That's some physical system you can use a linear system to calculate them, and you get good alpha x. But for biological systems, they are very, very complex, and so you may need to see. So when we say when you ignore the bilateral heterogeneity and assume that everyone has the same number of patterns, it's appealing for simplicity. We show that such averaging can produce a very misleading result. Not that we have been doing this average, it's okay. We start with that. Then, we must have an back of mind in terms of when we are talking about our limitation. We must discuss that all of what I have done, I didn't take care of the variance. I only took care of the mean. You must be able to tell people, if you are a whatever and you are not sincere, it's like a pharmacist that's not sincere. No, you are going to kill a lot of tests. Yeah. No. You just, I'm letting you. Yeah. No, that's enough for my people. Oh, my God.
If you are to, develop a model or to model such a population, will it also give you a misleading result? I don't know if you understand the question.
Now, if I look to where we have
a system, for example, 1 man, 1 wife, like a Christian setting.
Because people in that setting, there are people who are also married more than one. Yeah. Yes or no? Yes. It's still a segment of you don't know. So you have to, for you to student, you have to be more like answers down. If I'm looking at now, if I'm looking at there are certain things I can ignore when I'm modeling. Yes, I can ignore every other thing. I cannot say that I'm looking at a model that looks at the set of people in mathematical conference. So what makes everybody the same is participants as a what? You understand? I'm looking, my model is to capture the dynamics of people that attended this conference as participants. So what is the intersection? Participant. I have ignored other benefits like age, like sex, like color, tribe, where they came from, career status, a lot of things I will know. Do you understand? So make my model simple. But real life is not as simple as that. You understand now? So you can start simple, but you must know that heterogeneity exists, complexity exists. Are you getting that? So now I'm going to finish from this slide. So for many infections such as measles, pox, chickenpox, a high basic phenomenon means that the average age at infection is low. You understand that? The age that people get the infection, the minimum age is low. That's why the output is high. I know for most of these heterogeneous cells, when I'm factoring heterogeneity, what I see is that I know that it's low in the homogeneous. I was talking about this that the output that I'm getting as 3 homogeneous of the same kind of model, when I use an heterogeneous model, I'm not become very hard. So what happens that when the Arnold like the Arnold that was calculating when I was 3 become 18. Now what happened in that case? Because it now becomes more difficult for intervention to get it. Well, I don't get from because all the intervention they are putting in, the percentage of effectiveness will be seen very low. Because what is happening is that there are internal heterogeneity that is frustrating effectiveness of that intervention. So now, and therefore, they are most commonly encountered every childhood, like some of these ones that. So the modeling of this social partnership is also require further partitioning of the population this time in terms of age. Some of you are doing this Not just issues of the SIR, SIR. No, look further. People have done SIR, as repeated trip, look at X class, CSA, same thing, cholera. And then STIs, the subdivisions are determined by number of contacts. Number of contacts. Number of contacts. How many contacts do we have? Now, for childhood disease contact, the subdivision are due to the nature of contacts. Not number. For childhood disease, nature. What kind of contacts? Now, for STIs, number of contacts. Now, number of contacts you have. So we make you whether high risk or low risk. And then, because some diseases are common in childhood but rare in adults, those individuals who exposed to children are the greatest risk, like the caregivers. So now, due to their applications, children predominantly mix with other children, and therefore age act as a major determinant of risk. I'm going to stop here.